Hi, everybody. This is Elsie Clements here, doing my podcast episode for the second one for the month of November. This is supposed to be for the Lone Wolf Chat. Now, this is going to be in the middle of my NaNoWriMo, which is something I wasn't planning on doing. I had a pre-recorded section already done for fandoms, but when I looked over the video and I, edited the feed, I was like, this ain't gonna work. So I gotta do something new. And it came to me that I'll explain it in the podcast. It came to me that what am I thinking? The story, I'm just gonna delete this here. The story of Death Stranding came out, and there was a lot of controversy. So I decided to talk about that a little bit because it does pertain to writing. So I'm just going to get my little thing here set up, and I'm going to start and move my microphone a little closer. Okay, so now it can hear me. Okay, so I am recording in 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is Elsie Clements here, and on today's episode of the Lone Wolf Chat, I'm going to talk about Hideo Kojima. Now, we're in the month of November, which is, for most of writers, our NaNoWriMo, which means we're all clacking away at our keyboards so we can get 50,000 words done in the amount of 30 days. I myself have made the 40,000 word mark, or over the 40,000 word marking, so I'm a little bit on the relaxed side that the month is getting by. And I decided to check out Hideo Kojima's newest game, Death Stranding. And let me tell you guys, I have never seen a fan base so divided on a story that I decided to look into it a little bit. Now, if you don't know who Hideo Kojima is, for all of you writers out there who don't play video games, he is pretty much known as the creator. He should be the co-creator, really, but creator of the Metal Gear series, whether it be Metal Gear or Metal Gear Solid. Over the last, 20 odd years, he's been writing a very, very big world with a very big plot line. And unfortunately, Kojima was let go by Konami, which is a whole different can of worms I won't get into. And right after his one last game he created, which was Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. And it was so scummy of them to do it the way they did that even they tried to take his name off the game. That's how bad it was. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Hideo Kojima as a writer himself. So his newest game just came out. It's called Death Stranding, which I have never seen a fan base so divided since Star vs. the Forces of Evil's ending, or better yet, when Steven Universe revealed that Pink Diamond was Rose Quartz. Well, I mean, it's a normal fandom reaction, but geez, I mean, even Miraculous Ladybug didn't get this type of treatment. But I digress. So the whole fan base the first thing that came out was the Death Stranding trailer. Now, I personally was a bit weirded out by the trailer, but I figured, hey, it's Kojima. We know the story's going to be a little bit weird. But dear God, these people were like, what the F is going on? Now, the main character is named Sam Porter in the story, and I'll talk about the story a little bit in a bit. But Norman Reedus plays the main character, Sam Porter. And it's not the first time Hideo Kojima has picked him for one of his stories. In fact, they were scheduled to do the new Silent Hill game that was dubbed PT, which unfortunately got canceled by Konami. Starting to see a pattern here with Konami, with their games. But anyway, so it's not the first time they worked with him. And this type of story, before I even get into the story, had all these actors who did a phenomenal job. These were like real actors, and they were wearing these motion capture suits, and the technology that was used to recreate these characters is amazing. Everybody did a great job. There was no one that was lacking in the acting or voice acting department. Even Troy Baker, who plays an antagonist and you know, ultimately, I've never really seen him act on TV, but Troy Baker is one of the veterans in the video game or anime voice acting industry. So hearing his voice and seeing his face, like acting for real life, was crazy. And the only other time I've ever really seen him act was when he was playing Joel in The Last of Us. And that game's coming out, that sequel's coming out soon. So, you know, more about Troy Baker down the line. But anyway, the whole point of the story now, with Hideo Kojima, his story was the fact that America was divided by these supernatural beings. I'm just summing it up. I know someone's gonna say it better, but the whole point is there's these big incidents that happened, and the United States became disconnected. Sam was supposed to go across the country, and reconnect everybody through a big mainframe or whatever. Now, let me say this: I'm pretty much summarizing the story, so I don't want to give into spoiler territory, so I'm going to try my best to not spoil it, because the game is fairly new and there are probably people out there who are listening or watching my video right now that I don't want to spoil it for. So I'll try to keep it, you know, pretty brief. But there are so many features in this game that I wish I had a PlayStation 4 to play it. My brother has one, but I know he's not going to let me go because he's a Fortnite fan, so I probably won't be able to get that. Whatever. But I did manage to watch the whole story on YouTube. At this point, and I think content creators should probably, video game creators should probably note this. That's probably why Nintendo has such a hard stance on not spoiling their games. The game comes out after a week. You're probably going to see it on the internet, on YouTube. Let's plays, walkthroughs. Someone's going to find a way. It's going to get leaked online. And I understand, you know, before I get into the writing thing, the standpoint of why Nintendo does what it does. They're a little too hard, in my opinion, they've let up over the years, thank goodness. But I understand why they're so hard on people pushing the game on, leaking the whole storyline of the game online. Now, me personally, if I had a PlayStation 4, even if I had already watched the story on YouTube, I'm going to still go ahead and play it. But I understand where they're coming from. You kind of just spoiled, like, great scenes. Like, there's one part in the game, in the storyline, where you get these little pod things, where you can get different goodies, like MP3 songs and stuff. And I swear, it looks like, the AI from Sahelanthropus from Metal Gear Solid 5. It was like a tube thing, and and in Metal Gear Solid 5, it was this thing that had the boss's memories AI in there. And I swear, the thing looked like a little mini Sahelanthropus AI system. But I'm going way off track. The whole story is really good, and if you can, I would go ahead and watch it. But the reason why I'm really mainly talking about Hideo Kojima is we're in NaNoWriMo. We're all in our first draft. We have to go through editing, we have to go through writing, we have to go through a process. With Hideo Kojima, however, it seems like this man is the king of padding, extreme padding. And what do I mean by that? Well, I've played the Metal Gear Solid games, not the Metal Gear games, Metal Gear Solid games. And I will say this about Hideo Kojima. The man knows how to tell a story. But dear God, his exposition and padding is ridiculous. But we still love him for it. And the question is, why do we still love Hideo Kojima's work, despite the fact that he has padded the crap out of the entire story? Why do we love him so much? Let's go back to I think it was in the 90s. Let's go back to Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, when that game came out. Back in the day, let's say, 1998. I was right. Let's go back to 1998. Back when PlayStation still had the blocky animation. This is before the GameCube made the remake, and supposedly there's another remake coming out by Nintendo, but I think that got scrapped. They haven't really said, but back in the 1990s, back when people would look like blocks, their hands were fused together, and you just see little shades that were supposed to be their eyes. Or their eyes were buggy open like this, and they all had movements that went up and down with just the movement of the arms to show breathing. Metal Gear Solid came out, and the whole story, just to I'm not going to recap it, but the story was the most convoluted thing I have ever seen in my entire life. Why do I say that? Well, back when I was dating, before I got married to my current husband, my ex-boyfriend was a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid series. I mean, geez Louise, I've never seen such a guy, a Metal Gear Solid fan. So he had me play the game. I was like, what the heck is going on? It's a tactical espionage game, but then there's like his brother, and he's a clone, and his brother's a clone, and then there's this guy named Big Boss, and the one clone's trying to recreate something. I was like, what in the heck is going on? That's how confused I got with Metal Gear Solid at first, the Twin Snakes. Now, it's completely different. So, Metal Gear Solid was the most convoluted thing I have ever seen in my life, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I did a little digging after we broke up to figure out what the heck is Metal Gear Solid. And dear Lord, did I get so much information. I could literally dedicate a podcast to just Metal Gear's storyline. But make a long story short, back in 1964, there was a guy named Jack, I can't remember his name. And I'll get to the padding. For the love of God, there was so much padding. Make a long story short, he was a soldier that was trained by this big guy, by this chick named the Boss. She got killed by him, as supposed to be stated by their country, so they could stop the Cold War. He realized how much BS that was, that he had to kill the woman he loved. He created a military front called Military Sans Frontières. And to make a long story short, the government had a little problem with that, and so did his former boss did, and the whole world went into a war because two idiots could basically not come to an agreement of what the former mentor wanted the world to be. So there was like, let's see, it started in if I had to guess, the Phantom Pain started in 1984, and I'm just pulling up my calculator here. Just gonna grab my phone here. Let's see. Technically, Snake Eater was the first story. Then we got Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes, and the Phantom Pain, which 1975 technically would be where the story began of the Great Schism. So let's see. Guns of the Patriots is the last story chronologically in the Patriots storyline. We take 2014 minus 1975. 39 years, almost 40 years before these two morons decided, hey, maybe we're doing something stupid, which at that point, one of them was pretty much a vegetation unit at that point. Hideo Kojima managed to make a 40-year war condensed into 20-something freaking years. And that is not an easy feat. Just not at all. And why is my camera acting up? Okay, I got him. And that's not an easy feat at all. So he's the king of exposition. If you've ever played any of his Metal Gear games, if you've played Death Stranding recently, and there are so many Let's Players out there who's already probably talked about this, his storytelling is the biggest exposition dump I have ever seen in a storyline. I thought Netflix had the cornerstone of exposition, but they do not top Hideo Kojima. Now, what do I mean by that statement? Well, to start, and this is just to start, you start the games with at least, when came to the Twin Snakes, about 10 minutes of exposition, followed by a tutorial system, which really annoyed the crap out of me when I was younger. Now that I'm older, I get it. And in Death Stranding's case, you're talking about 20 minutes level of exposition. He gives you so much backstory that you have to pause the game sometimes and go, wait, okay, so let me get this straight. I am a super spy. I'm going in here to stop a military operation, a terrorist group, from launching nukes to the United States because my dad, or who was my former mentor, decided to go cuckoo-cuckoo And it's my job to stop the leader of this operation from succeeding. Now, mind you, I just summoned up the twin snakes. This is before Snake even finds out that the main baddie is his twin brother and he's a clone. And do you see where I'm coming from with the King of Exposition here? I feel like I'm rambling because that's how much of exposition dump he does. But the question is, why do we love this exposition dump? When you go into writing, you're not supposed to do an exposition dump. That's one of the things they kind of ingrain in you from the door when you're writing. Exposition dump is a no-no. You don't do that. Hideo Kojima, on the other hand, can exposition dump the crap out of his games, and no one seems to say a word. The last time I really just started seeing this is in Death Stranding, and that's because everybody was like, what the F is going on? Why is these storylines so long? So, why do we like him? And why do we like his exposition dumps? It's hard to say. I think it's because with Hideo, the way he does his stories, he gives you an exposition dump, and then he gives you all these levels to play, and then he gives you another exposition dump. But the point of the exposition dump is to keep this person interested. Whereas if you do an exposition dump in a story, you may overwhelm your writer. Now imagine if Hideo Kojima, in his form of writing, decided to do this as a regular novel. First of all, the average writer's probably gonna go, what? Wait, hold on. Let me go back to page. Okay, I'm confused. I'm done with the story. But with his video games, he can stretch out the story as far as he wants to. Now, I'm not saying this is always a good thing, but there are times when Hideo can pull back his exposition. One of the greatest I've seen was when he was doing Castlevania Lords of Shadow, another Konami game that they had potential to keep going with, and they screwed the pooch on. He had a long story. The whole premise of the story is that Gabriel Belmont is supposed to go around and stop the three Lords of Shadow from destroying humanity, and the long story short, and bring his dead wife back to life. Now, the following games later with Trevor Belmont and Alucard and all the other Belmont characters, that whole exposition dump, I'm gonna leave that one alone. That's a whole separate video. That's a whole separate story to talk about. But the whole point was he padded his stories. He exposition dumped his stories, but not to the extent of Metal Gear or Death Stranding. And it still came out as a pretty decent game. So it's not like Hideo knows, or Hideo really, how do I put it? It's not like Hideo needs to not exposition dump, because he's done it before with Lords of Shadow. But when you think about him not doing exposition, you have a pretty boring game. With Death Stranding, everybody dubs it as a walking simulator. But without those expositions, without those cutscenes explaining the storyline or what the purpose of Sam's mission is, you have a pretty boring walking simulator. If it wasn't for those actors, man, you would just be like, okay, about 20 minutes in, I'm kind of bored. And even with the backtracking in that story, guess what? You're still enthralled because you want to see the ending. So yes, Hideo Kojima is the king of exposition, but he still maintains his 3-act structure: a beginning, a middle, and the end. Let's talk about Metal Gear. Let's see, which one am I want to talk about one of my favorites, which is ironically the one they tried to take him off of, Metal Gear Solid 5. Not Ground Zero, it's the other one, the Phantom Pain. In the Phantom Pain, we get a beginning of the structure. It starts off right after. Before I go any further, if you haven't played the game, just click off or click forward. If you don't want me to talk about the 3-act structure or spoil the game if you haven't played it, which at this point it would be kind of redundant considering the game's been out for God knows how long at this point. Let's see. Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain takes place in 1985, and the game, the Phantom Pain, came out in 2015. The game's 4 years old at this point, or almost 5 come 2020. So at this point, if I'm spoiling the game for you, I apologize. But the game's been out for about almost 5 years come December 31st. So, no, well, if I do the math. But anyway. The game's 4 years old. At this point, if I'm spoiling the game for you, I apologize in advance. But I swear, someone's already spoiled the game for you. Okay? Okay. So, Act 1 is the introduction to what happened after Ground Zeroes. Snake was, and I figured out the twist of the story about 20 minutes in, and that's because I'm that massive of a Metal Gear fan. Snake ends up in a coma after a helicopter crash, and we're given an avatar to play as. So we're like, okay, let me pick an avatar, which is completely different than what Snake is before the game starts. Kazuhiro Miller is with us during the plane crash. We see the flashbacks, we see the surgery. He's like, don't die on me, Snake, don't die on me. And he disappears. We wake up in these bleary states almost. And this is just Act 1, mind you. We wake up in a bleary state, and we're going in and out of it. When we finally awaken, we're shown our face, which is supposed to be Snake. And you have a horn sticking out of your head, and you start to freak out because you realize you've lost your hand. And you're like, what the F? And of course, the doctor sedates you. Then you wake up again. And the doctor explains that we've kept you in a coma. We've tried to get all the shrapnel out. He shows you the horn. He shows you what happened to you. And he says that we've been using tissue massages to keep you alive. And then, of course, I'm talking about the sedation scene again. Then you wake up again, and there's something going on in the hospital. The doctor is killed, and a woman is stepping over the bed to kill you, but then she's knocked over in the face and then set on fire and falls out a window. You'll meet her later. You're met up with a guy named Ahab, who is voiced by the ever so famous Kiefer Sutherland. Now, mind you, your character has not spoken yet, but your whole objective in Act 1 is to escape the hospital. You escape the hospital, you meet up with Raiden, what's that guy's name? Ocelot. And Act 1 is beginning you from becoming the cripple known as the boss, as Big Boss, known to being the strong, silent, scowling Big Boss. And your whole plan is to create the military Sans Frontieres, which is a soldier without borders. That's what you recreate at first. But then we go to Act 1 is to rebuild your military. Then we get to Act 2. Which is, it was Military Sans Frontieres, but now it's called Diamond. The mercenary group is called Diamond Dogs. After finding out about Act 2 is once you build up Diamond Dog, now it's time to get revenge on the United States and Skullface for what they did to you. That's Act 2. So you start interrogating people. The first thing you do is you find some guy named Cold Talker who explains about this disease that's about to become rampant in the world about learning language. Then you meet Quiet, an assassin that was trying to kill you but falls in love with you. And that's a whole, she's pretty much, okay, for God's sakes, I'm not just saying, she's clickbait. She is straight fap/clickbait. I am so gonna have to edit out this word. She's the chick. She's the chick in a bikini, and she can't wear clothes because she can't breathe. We all know that's it's a pervert's wonderland. The fact that she gets to jiggle her body and jiggle her butt in front of you. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, feminists, I get it. Can we move on, please? We get it. Anyway, so Act 2 is trying to find Skullface and kill him. That's Act 2, is to find him. During Act 2, we find out that you have a son, supposedly, named, what is this little boy's name? He's called White Mamba, but his real name, we know that eventually he will become Liquid Snake. He's one of the 3 clone children from the big overarching storyline that happened in Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. So good callback from there. So Act 2 is trying to find out Eli. That's that little brat's name. His name's Eli. Eli wants to kill you. Then you have to turn around and try to raise these child soldiers. So that's part 2. You take out these military operations, and they want you to kill these child soldiers and stuff. And you take them in to take care of them. And you also have to find Eli and take care of him too because he thinks you're his dad. And you also still have to find Skullface. That's Act 2. Finding Skull. And at the end of Act 2, You find Skullface, who starts up Act 3. You're captured by Skullface. And you have the Sahelanthropus that was created by Hal Emmerich's dad, who was secretly working for Skullface the whole freaking time, which is why Peace Walker fell apart the way it did. Do you understand what I mean by exposition dump here? I am literally condensing Metal Gear Solid 5 The Twin Snakes. I mean, no, why did I say Twin Snakes? The Phantom Pain. I have condensed the story, and there's still callbacks to other stories. So, do you understand what I mean by exposition dump? But it turns out that, what's this guy's name? Dr. Emmerich, he may not have been the bad guy after all. He was held under duress. But guess what? His son is still alive. And then, oh my gosh, wait a minute. What happened to his wife? The first wife, Hal's mother. That's part of Act 3. Guess what? He killed her. All because because the whole story was he was going to make a Metal Gear of his own because he's an a-hole like that. And so he was going to put his baby child Hal in the pod so he could become the pilot of Sahelanthropus. His wife found out and tried to get him arrested or whatever. He threw her inside the Metal Gear pod, which, by the way, I'm still trying to figure out how that happened when the man's in a wheelchair, but whatever, I guess he tricked her and had her suffocate to death. So he's a bad guy. And then he finds out about the virus that... Okay, let me explain the virus for a second here. Let me just explain exposition dump on the virus. There is a vocal cord parasite. That's the overall MacGuffin of this storyline. Oh gosh, I hate that. I love you, Hideo, but I swear to God, if I have to explain all your exposition and MacGuffins, instead of the overarching thing is nanomachines in Metal Gear Solid, usually the series, but for the Phantom Pain, instead of nanomachines, we have parasites. So basically, if you speak the language that's assigned to the parasite, it will come out and kill everybody and turn them into mindless drone zombies. Quiet's affected. The female sex pot has been affected by it, and if she speaks English, she'll kill everybody. So guess what? Dr. Emmerich found out. And guess what he did? He decided to make an experiment and turn a whole medical unit into people that are affected by the vocal cords parasite, and Snake has no choice but to kill them to save everybody else. So the MacGuffin that was introduced in Act 1 by ways of Quiet and a team of people that are affected by vocal cords parasite by the Russian strain gets set up in Act 2 by being introduced by the character Code Talker, who tries to make makes an antidote to the parasite. In Act 3, Snake has to kill a good chunk of his men in order to stop the parasite. That is why he is the king of exposition, because we will still keep playing this game. I will still continue to keep playing this game, even though this is a glaring MacGuffin that makes me want to smack my head. I will continue to play this. So, I am trying to keep this under 40 minutes, but I'm guessing that's not going to happen. But anyway. So they find out Dr. Emmerich did it, and he killed his wife, and this guy's kind of an a-hole, and he's kind of a backstabber. Plus, he sold them out to the U.S. military, which in turn got their main antagonist Skullface come and destroy military San Frontiers because, and guess what? And you know the worst part about all of this? It was just, Skullface was just using Snake as a trap to get Major Zero, his old antagonist from Metal Gear Solid 4 and Metal Gear Solid 3. God, what the heck, Hideo? Oh my God, Hideo. Anyway, so Emmerich is banished, and we know what happens to Emmerich. He ends up committing suicide, and in the storyline we find on Metal Gear Solid 2. So, okay, he's gone. But let's make it even worse. Let's exposition dump this even worse. So Eli, that little brat who becomes Liquid Snake, who's psychotic, decides, I am going to challenge my father yet again. My father breaks my arm for the second time. You'd think at this point he would get it. But he decides, hey, wait a minute. Everybody's distracted. Want to hold this guy by gunpoint with the helicopter and takes the philanthropist and the child soldiers and go F off somewhere. Okay. Now, mind you, when I get into this, part of the storyline, I just want to point out that this is around the time Hideo got fired by Konami, so that storyline's kind of cut content. But Eli finds out that the big boss, the man that he's been trying to fight, was not his father. And he's been infected by the vocal cord parasite. The guy gives him a bullet and walks off. Mind you, this boy is dying. Now, that was an a-hole-ish move, but I'm guessing at this point he was so done with Eli's bullcrap that he was like, you know what? If you want to die so badly, here's a bullet. You do it. They run off. The vocal cord parasite is taken out of his throat by a psychic child who becomes Psycho Mantis by Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. He shows up throughout the game. I did not mention him because he's only shows up in like 3 or 4 cutscenes. He's a kid with psychic powers, and somehow, through some psychic way, he takes the vocal cord parasite and then takes Eli with him because they both connect on a mental level to trauma or whatever. That's it's not even worth mentioning because, well, you know, when I say exposition dump, at that point your brain's going to be like, okay, you know what, whatever, okay, we know you lead up to Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, so whatever, cool. It is what it is. So, remember when I said that I figured out about 20 minutes into the game that I found out the plot twist about 20 minutes into this game when I was playing it? Well, let me get to that in a second. Now, mind you, there is an epilogue to after Act 3. There is a part 4. After the 3-act structure in the story, you think it's concluded. Mind you, I just told you part of Act 4. When you think the storyline is concluded, when you think the story is over, no, there's a truth storyline. A truth. Throughout Metal Gear Solid 5, you're given these tapes of interrogation and conversations that you're supposed to listen to while you're waiting, while you're in the helicopter center or whatever. It's kind of good to listen to them, even though that's really where a bulk of his expedition. The bulk of Hideo's exposition dump in the games are between the video cassettes, the cassette tapes, which back in the 80s, cassette tapes were a thing, and the cutscenes. But the real plot line is to listen to the cassettes. Because, as we find out later, there's something called the truth, which is a very final storyline. You go all the way back to the very first chapter when you were in that hospital. And when you do the storyline again, at this point, you should be a well-seasoned character in the story. You already know how the story's supposed to play out. At the end, you get an extra scene where Ishmael gets out the truck. And then at the top of the hill, you see him take his bandages off. And you see him talking to Ocelot. And then you find out, which at this point, the snake that you've been playing as figures it out too. Ishmael is the real... Let just sink in for a second. The Ishmael that you've been playing has been your partner in part 1, in chapter 1 of the storyline, is really Big Boss. What the F? And mind you, when I found this out, my husband was laughing because he said, "You're such a geek for saying this." I'm like, I was going, I knew it! And let me tell you how I've come to that conclusion. So if you play Metal Gear Solid 3 and you get through the storyline, you notice some things about Metal Gear Solid. One of them was Big Boss's eyes are green. I'm not even kidding. Big Boss's eyes are green. And the guy you're playing as, when they show the picture of his face coming up, you see your avatar and you go back to being this Big Boss again. You're like, wait a minute. His eyes are blue. That's not Big Boss. And I was like, wait a minute. About 20 minutes, I'm like, that's not Big Boss. You're not Big Boss. Because your eyes are blue. His eyes are green. And my husband's like, how in the heck? I just shrugged my shoulders. That's how I found out the big twist in the storyline. That's how detailed Hideo Kojima is with his exposition dump. I have no idea how this man is able to keep up with over 20 years worth of story and able to keep up with the fact that there are 2 snakes out there. But it also explains Metal Gear 1 and 2. In the old games of Metal Gear 1 and 2, there are two bosses. One gets knocked off a cliff, the next one gets blown up. And of course, by Metal Gear Solid 4, we find out that he was resurrected or whatever to die again. That's just silly, Hideo. That's just silly. But anyway, so we find all this out, and to make a long story short, we find out that the guy we've been playing as was the medic that was trying to save his life at Metal Gear Ground Zeroes. And Big Boss was put in a coma, but they decided to use the medic and train him to become the next Big Boss. And there's a big reveal storyline at the end where he plays the tape. And he's like, so now you know the truth. I am you and you are me. And he said, as the world sees it, you are now Big Boss. And you see this demonic smile on his face. And as he's doing this, the horn on his head gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like he's becoming a devil. So the whole twist of the whole storyline was to connect Metal Gear Solid 5 to Metal Gear 1 and 2. So you figure out how Big Boss survived. And in the background, you see that the flashes of light, and when he smashes the becomes Diamond Dogs, he becomes Zanzibar Land. Outer Haven. So you go from Diamond Dogs to Outer Haven. So that's the whole plot in a nutshell. He did the 3-act structure, and we get the epilogue with the epic twist that I figured out a long time ago before I even finished the game that wasn't Big Boss. And there are other key factors to why you know that's not Big Boss. His humor isn't there. His sarcasm isn't there. The grunts, the gruffs. Big Boss is a gruff character considering his upbringing, yes. But he acted differently. And then Keith Sutherland, not David Hayter, was playing him, which I know that might have been a Union thing or a Konami thing. I don't care. But do you see what I mean by the King of Exposition? I just spent probably 10-20 minutes just telling you the storyline of Metal, and we're at 35 minutes now, of Metal Gear Solid 5. So with that being said, why do we love him so much as a writer, Hideo Kojima? He tells a good story. Despite the padding, despite the huge MacGuffins he has in the storyline, we love his stories. And the great thing is, he's a great word builder. I mean, think about it. The Metal Gear series is over 20 years old in timeline. We're talking from Metal Gear back when Nintendo was coming out, all the way to PlayStation 4. Or in my case, Xbox One. And he made great storylines for over 20 freaking years. He kept the same universe going, and that's why we love him. Besides the fact that he's the King of Exposition, and dear God, he is the biggest King of Exposition, we still love his storylines. We're gonna keep watching them. Yes, Death Stranding was a big divide amongst the fans because it was way outside of what he normally would do for Metal Gear. But it also comes to the conclusion that Death Stranding is not Metal Gear. It's a completely different storyline. And that's something we have to remember. He's not going to write the same way he did for Konami. And in Death Stranding case, it's a pretty good story in my opinion. Yes, if you take out all the epic walking tracks and the epic stupid humor parts, he actually has a good story, which is to reconnect people. The world became divided because of a great death, and now life has come back to the world, so not and a great calamity was averted. It's time for us to become together as a species. Great storyline in my opinion. It doesn't have to be the and to be honest, you can pretty much turn Death Stranding into an epic story. He pretty much made movie quality storyline in the condension of a video game. And he's not the first creator to do so. He's not going to be the last either. Think about the Last of Us. Think about the Batman Arkham series. Heck, think about LA Noire, no matter how much I hated the ending. Great storytelling. So it doesn't matter that he's the King of Exposition, though, because we're going to still watch him because he's that great of a storyteller. I personally am looking forward to whatever games he makes, no matter how weird or convoluted it sounds. I'm still going to love it. He even took the time out to have people create great soundtracks to fulfill his storylines. In Metal Gear, none of the music he plays is terrible. None of it. Even in the original Nintendo, music was pretty good. So yeah, he's a great storyteller. No matter what, we're gonna still watch him. We're still gonna play his games. So hey, yes, he's a King Exposition dump, but guess what? We're still gonna love him. And that is all I'm gonna talk about today in Lone Wolf Chat. We're going into 40 minutes, so I need to wrap it up. So this is the end of the podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, or wherever you get your podcasts at. My website is lonewolfchat.com, and donations are always welcome to keep the podcast going. And you can always donate at least $3 to Ko-fi, which is ko-fi.com/Elsie Clements. I'll put that in the show description, and I will talk to you guys again in the next 2 weeks.